let's talk the difference between stress and anxiety. So here's the thing. We live in a society where we kind of use the terms interchangeably. You know, we talk about stress and anxiety, and we might just use each term for each situation. However, there is a difference, and it's really important to understand the difference so we know what we can do when we find ourselves in those situations. So let's dive in and let's have a gander at what the difference is between stress and anxiety and what we can do when we find ourselves in those situations. All right, let's dive into stress. So stress is essentially a physical and emotional response to a external stressor or an external threat. So this can be a short-term threat, short-term stressor, such as going for a job interview. Maybe you've had a fight with a loved one. Maybe you've got to pick up the phone and do your first sales call. Anything like that, right? It's an external factor. They can also be long-term. So it can be, maybe you've been out of work for a period of time, or maybe you have a loved one that's quite unwell, or maybe you're unwell yourself, right? So they're all the kind of external factors that can cause stress. They can definitely make you feel uncomfortable. They can lead to insomnia. They can lead to making you feel like your heart is racing. It can lead you to feeling uncomfortable, butterflies in your stomach, headaches, all those types of things. However, what happens with stress is once you've overcome that external stressor, or that external stressor has been removed, you go back into a state of calm, or you go back into a state of normality, right? You go back into what we might call rest and digest. So that's stress, and that's really important to understand. So you have a situation, you overcome the situation, that situation has been removed, or that stressor has been removed, and you go back into a state of calm. Now let's look at anxiety and how it differs. Anxiety, on the other hand, is the same physical and emotional response, but without the external factor, and it usually accompanies with really intrusive thoughts, worry, unease, all of those kind of intrusive thoughts that just sort of make you worry about something that potentially hasn't happened. So you're not really reacting to an external stressor, you're not reacting to an external threat, you're worrying about something potentially happening. Now that becomes really different because it means that you can't get back into that calm state. You can't get back into rest and digest because of these intrusive thoughts these intrusive thoughts that are happening, and you're reacting to those thoughts rather than the actual situation. So let's now have a bit of a chat about what we can do when we find ourselves in stressful situations versus anxious situations. So when we're feeling stressed out, it can be really important that we actually make sure that we really take care of ourselves, right? It's really, really easy when we're feeling stressed out to sort of throw all those really good habits out the window, getting a good night's sleep, making sure that we're eating a healthy diet, making sure that we're getting enough exercise in, making sure that we're doing things that actually fill our cup and actually not reduce our cup, right? So making sure that you've got a really good habit structure in place. So making sure that you're not sacrificing your sleep, aim to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, making sure that you're doing anything, doing some exercise, even if it's just a 10-minute walk around the block, making sure that you're eating healthy as well. It's really interesting because diet, exercise, and sleep all mitigate the impact that stress can have on our physical health. And if we actually start to feel quite run down from the stress that we're under, it can actually increase our stress. So making sure that we've got some really good, habits in place to make sure that we can manage our stress. Other things that you can do when you find yourself in a stressful situation is to make sure that you're acknowledging what's going on. It's really easy when we feel stressed out to sort of push it to the side because it makes us feel uncomfortable. But what can be really helpful in these situations is to take a moment, acknowledge how you're physically feeling, understand the thoughts that are coming with it. So acknowledge how you're feeling, have a look at them like you're a third person. Don't engage with them, just look at them, label them. Then what you can do is take a bit of a deep breath. I know everyone tells you to breathe when you're stressed out, but there is a physical reason for it. So when we're under stress, we actually can find ourselves in the fight or flight response. So when we do a couple of really good breathing exercises, it can actually get us out of the fight or flight response back into rest and digest response, which is that calm, cool, and collected type of feeling. And then what we can actually start to do is once we're sort of back into a state of calm and we feel a little bit more control, we can actually take a bit of a step back and look at the situation, look at the stressor, and actually start asking ourselves, what can I control? what can't I control, and what can I influence? And really focusing on what we can control and what we can influence in those situations, right? So for example, let's say you're going for a job interview. You would acknowledge that you're a little bit nervous about going to the job interview. You would label it saying, I'm a bit nervous. You would take a deep breath, and then you would get into the understanding, what can I control, what can't I control, and what can I influence? Now, you might want to write a list of all the things you can't control. So for instance, you can't control who's going to be interviewing you. You can't control how they're going to respond. You can't control the traffic. You can't control any of that, right? Things that might be additional stresses that, can come into play. But what you can control is making sure that you research the company. You can make sure that you leave your house early to make sure that you get there on time, making sure that you feel comfortable in those situations, doing some interview preparation, things like that. And also obviously influencing the situation and making sure that when you go into the conversation with this person you're interviewing, you're showing up cool, calm, and collected by doing those breathing exercises, which can obviously influence the other person as well. So that's definitely some exercises that you can do to manage your stress in those situations if you find yourself in, having those external stresses. Now, anxiety, on the other hand, can be a little bit different. So sometimes when we find ourselves in anxious situations, because we're not able to control the external stressor, because we're reacting to something that's not exactly happening to us, we're worrying about stuff, we're ruminating on information, we're replaying events, or we're going sort of down the what if rabbit hole, we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and making sure that we are kind of getting out of that rumination. So anxiety is one of those things where you can still use the same type of framework. You can acknowledge how you're physically feeling, take a deep breath, but instead of understanding what you can control, you can look at what's the actual fact right now and what's the story I'm telling myself, and actually really break it down. So what are some of the facts that you can look at in that situation, and really focusing on that? That can actually help you feel like you're in a bit more control. Now, sometimes what you might need to do is remove yourself from a situation and actually kind of use some type of healthy distraction. So it could be, I'm feeling a little bit anxious. Acknowledging that, accepting that's how you're feeling right now. Do not fight it. Just acknowledge it, accept it. Go for a walk, talk to a friend, have a moment where you can kind of collect yourself. That's definitely things that you can do when you find that you're in an anxious situation. Now, if you are somebody that is really struggling with stress and really struggling with anxiety, make sure you do seek help. Make sure that you do get some help from a professional, like speak to your GP, speak to a counselor, see a psychiatrist, a psychologist if you need to. That's something that's really important as well. Sometimes we just need a little bit additional help to support us in those situations. Now, if you have any questions, or if you want to see if you are stressed or burnt out, make sure you take our burnout score down below. And of course, if you need me for any reason, if you have any other questions, please follow me on any other on all the other socials that I have. Make sure you follow this YouTube channel, and of course, feel free to ask a question in the comments below, and I will definitely try and get back to it.